Hello and welcome back to Scale Me Down. Please like and subscribe to support our channel. And this is a special episode all about painting radio control pilot busts. After all, when anyone looks at your radio control model, they're drawn to the human interest, which of course is the pilot and then the cockpit. We're going to show you two techniques, first with a brush and then with an airbrush in simple, easy steps as to how to achieve a bust like these. And I've placed a few affiliate links in the description below of some of the equipment that we've used. Of course, if you've purchased a 3D scan and print from us, when you're finished it'll also look like you. I'm going to hand over to my dad now, Michael Atherton, who will show you some simple, easy steps to achieve a great brush painted pilot bust.
You're going to need some paint, and these boxes of acrylic tubes are perfect as you can squeeze a small amount out and mix the colour you require without contaminating the entire tube. You'll also need some good quality paintbrushes. These have synthetic fibres and are pointed in shape. You'll need a non-porous surface to mix the paint, some clean water and some paper towels. Let's mix a flesh tone from these basic colours. It's easy to see if you've mixed the right colour by comparing it to the back of your hand. We'll start by applying this flesh tone all over the face as a base coat. We'll later add to this by adjusting the basic flesh tone with white, red or burnt umber. These tints should be thinned to make them translucent. Highlights should be added to the brow ridges, the bridge of the nose, the top of the cheeks and the chin by mixing some white into the basic flesh tone. We'll blend the highlight out into the surrounding area. Areas in shadow, such as under the eyes and under the eyebrows, should be darkened by adding burnt umber to the flesh mix. Once again, we'll blend these shadows out into the surrounding area. Wash your brushes regularly in clean water and dab the excess on a paper towel. The eyes require the most care and attention. The whites are this shape and are light blue-grey in colour. The iris, the coloured portion, fills about a third and is cut off at the top by the upper eyelid. Make sure that the iris is dead centre and add a black dot for the pupil. There's a dark line above the upper eyelid. To start, paint the eyes a little big and then cut them in by overpainting the eyelids. The eyes really are the most important detail to get right. It's worth taking your time to get them absolutely right and rework them as required. To finish the face, we'll do the lips by tinting our flesh tone with a little red and brown. The tint here is quite subtle, and keep referencing your own face in the mirror. Let's add details such as the helmet, goggles and outfit. Conservative colours here will draw attention to the face. Where a thin line is required, such as this padding behind the goggles, paint the first edge carefully and then overpaint the second colour, leaving a thin, sharp line. Choosing the correct size paintbrush can make adding details such as this goggles strap an easy one-step process. Finishing the goggle lenses is down to personal preference. Gloss black or dark blue works well. My dad prefers to use cooking foil, which is cut to shape and stuck down with double-sided tape, creating a reflective finish. Don't be afraid to rework your paint job until you're happy. Why not give it a try? All that's left to do now is to fit him into an aircraft. It's surprising how a few hours painting can transform your RC project.
Thanks for that, Dad. I hope you all found that informative and useful. Now we'll look at a technique using an airbrush to achieve similar results.
Along with your double action airbrush, you're also going to require an air compressor with a moisture trap, a stand or clean pot such as this, and a way of cleaning the airbrush such as this ultrasonic jewellery cleaner. You're also going to need some consumables including thinners, paper towels, blank paper and of course the paints. I don't use water to thin acrylic paints as it doesn't flash off fast enough. I start by blowing some of this neat thinners through the airbrush into the clean pot. I've drilled a little hole in the bottom of the bust and mounted it on a stick to make it easier to hold. I'm using this red-brown to lay down a base coat, and it's mixed with thinners to the consistency of semi-skimmed milk. We'll test it on this piece of paper. We press down and hold for the air, and the further back we move the trigger, the more paint we get. We'll apply our base coat all over in many thin passes. On each stroke, I start the paint just before the bust and stop it just after. I run the air continuously, however. This prevents spatter off the end of the needle. Once that's dry, it's time to add some basic flesh tone. I spray this on very lightly, mainly in a downward direction. This will inform us where most of the shading should be. By blocking the end, we can draw thinners back through the gun between colours. For the next pass, I've adjusted the basic flesh tone with some white for a highlight colour. It's important that as we add more layers, we make the paint thinner and thinner. We're aiming for each layer to be transparent to show the layers underneath. With some very over-thin red, we're adding some colour to areas such as the cheeks, the chin and the end of the nose. If you look in the mirror, you'll see where these areas should be and how they're meant to look. With the airbrush, it's dead easy to fade these out, blending them into the rest of the skin tone. We'll add very thin red, brown or flesh tone back and forth a bit until we're happy with the tones on the face. Now I'm going to do the hair, and we're going to use this scribbly type of stroke. As we move the airbrush closer to the job, we must move the trigger less to shoot less paint. Again, we'll build the hair up very gradually in several thin layers. For very fine details, such as the eyebrows, I remove this nozzle guard so we can get the airbrush closer to the workpiece. Since we're going to move over to a paintbrush for a bit, now's a good time to take our airbrush apart and chuck it into the jewellery cleaner. These make light work of cleaning out your airbrush with just plain water and a few drops of washing up liquid. Back to the workbench, and we're going to add the lips. If you look at your own lips in the mirror, they're only a slight variation in colour from the tone of your skin. So on this palette I'm tinting our basic flesh tone with a bit of purple, and the result is almost brown. Now I'll paint in the whites of the eyes, which are actually light grey. I use a tiny pointed paintbrush, and you'll notice I rest my hand on the workpiece, just using my fingers to move the paintbrush like you would a pencil for these very fine details. For the coloured iris, I cheat a bit. I shave the end of a cocktail stick so that it dabs the cut off circular shape that we showed in the brush painting segment of this film. It's very important to place these dabs looking straight ahead, or the eyes will look very strange indeed. Finally, I use the other pointed end of the cocktail stick to dot in the black pupils. We can finish up by adding some details such as his headset. I avoid using black for these details, and instead this is charcoal grey. We'll just add his headset brackets. When I fly full size, I usually wear prescription sunglasses. So to replicate them, we're going to use some of this fine wire that you get from your local florist, and some of this clear plastic packaging material that I've tinted with this Tamiya smoke paint. I'll use cyanoacrylate, CA, to glue the frames, but to glue the lenses I'll use canopy glue to avoid fogging them up.
And here he is, all finished in some natural daylight. Stay tuned and follow the channel to find out which plane we put him in. There we have two simple techniques for realistic results. If, like me, you're a little impatient, a hairdryer can be very useful to speed the drying process between layers. Don't be afraid to rework your pilot painting until you're happy. Give it a go, and we'll see you next time.